All right, welcome to flight 46. It's a dusty day up here at Kagel. And with the shadow of clear, we're up and away. I had just watched a buddy, Varesh, who gave us a ride up to the top, take off, and we were talking about how his hands moved. And so that's something I really tried to focus on this one. I kept my hands, like, you know, on the down tubes for a long time. Probably didn't have to keep them down on there for so long, could have moved them sooner. And also could have probably gone over the terrain sooner instead of going straight out as long as I did. Eventually poke around, start getting some pockets of lift. And so a huge focus, I would say the focus of this flight was working on my thermaling. And so I was working with a friend, Joe, on this. He was helping me out a bunch, giving me some pointers here and there. And having him on the radio was really nice. It's an experience that I hadn't had since my training hill or early mountain flight days. And getting that help on a more technical problem set really helped a lot for me. I mean, I gotta say the mental load was taxing having someone talking that much. At a few points he asked, you know, am I talking too much? Let me know. And I was like, no, it's not too much. But I will say this flight was mentally exhausting. Just Joe's eventually in the air. We get comms established. I'm basically just out here scrapping around, looking for lift. In the back of my head, I'm like, dang, like what if I sink out before we even get a chance to like try to work on some of these things? Biggest thing I learned about my skill level today was just how novice I am. It was crazy. Like, I mean, there was maybe like a few points later in this flight when I was, you know, way above launch, where I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna do whatever, boat around, have fun. But the majority of this, you know, I was like trying my darndest to try to get lift. And then I'm just watching this guy, Joe. I mean, he's on the radio, he's talking to me. He's having fun. He's like putting his legs up in the control bar. And so having a great pilot, given an example of their skill level, was actually really, I'd say, humbling and really beneficial for me to see of just, wow, there's a lot to learn here, because I'm definitely like in the throes of intermediate syndrome right now. You know, I have these thoughts in my head where I'm like, man, I want to launch like midday, do whatever. And this was just like a good reality check of like, wow, like I'm very beginner intermediate at this sport still. You know, there's a lot more lift out there than I thought. There's a lot more ways to get up and thermals to work than I originally thought in my head. You know, I've been kind of thinking this whole time, you know, there's like a couple little pockets I really got to get lucky, find one. This field of lift, you know, there's a grid pattern of lift out there. It's not like there's like 2 or 3 thermals. Like there's 1 thermals that I could potentially get to. I mean, obviously not all those are great thermals, but there's quite a few good thermals here. And it'd be really cool to see a top-down visualization of just how many there are.
Just whapping me on the face like crazy. Haven't heard anything from Joe on the radio, so I'm pretty sure my radio is like off or some shit. Pretty bouncy, pretty gnarly, but get some lift at least, so stoked on that. And just trying to figure out how to best do these turns up and downhill here. Yep.
Good, notice things like that, they could catch it.
I'm trying to figure out what to do. I'm kind of in the front, so I'm making some of the decisions. And then we both spot these birds, which is obviously a great sign. So see those birds, we're like, all right, I'm gonna head over there. So I start heading and turning. I probably turned a little sooner than I should have. And so we see Joe continue to go through, and he's actually much closer to the birds. And then he starts to get some lift. And so he's like, okay, come over here. Let's start doing some turns in this lift. And if we look at the graph here on the bottom left of the screen, we'll see this is my first consistent steep climb. It's not a huge one because we're starting with pretty good altitude. These are some of the steepest curves I think I've probably had, and probably the best climbs I've ever had. And a large part of that is because I was getting help finding these thermals, and then also getting like fine-tuned advice of when I should be turning in those thermals. And that was huge. And so here on this one, you know, Joe's kind of in my ear for the better. He's telling me, he's like, hey, like, you know, turn a little tighter, turn a little wider. And the results are huge. I mean, we can just see my great climb there. And that's something that I wasn't able to do before I had him, you know, giving me those tips. Because if we look at the chart farther in the past on the left side, we can see, you know, I'm kind of like bumping in and out. But this one is just like a nice straight line of climb. So this is a great example of me not knowing where to look for lift. So I'm, you know, kind of scratched around the bottom here looking for stuff. You know, bottom of the ridge is what I mean when I say bottom. Joe is like in decent lift back up on the ridge, but he's like, hey, I'm gonna come down here and I'm gonna show you what you're missing out on, dude. So he comes down and gets it in a nice spot in the volcano.
I got something right here. Come on in and join me.
I kind of get over there, and this was wild for me. I didn't really say this on the radio to him, but Joe, I'm sure you're watching now. It was so crazy for me turning this tightly with another glider. I mean, I've had a few passes like this before with people, but like I viewed those as like close calls. I was like, damn, like that was sketchy. And then like getting back here on this flight and doing a bunch of these tight turns, being this close, like, you know, I felt like we were like formation flying like some freaking F-18s, you know, in a dogfight or something like that.
You want me across from you. If I start getting closer to your tail, you turn tighter.
Yeah, and just seeing, you know, Joe's willingness to be like, all right, like, keep on turning tighter. I'm watching you turn tighter. Hearing somebody say that is really helpful, because if I, you know, and this is like not something I actually want, but it's like if every pilot had comms in the air on any given day and everybody was talking to each other when they were thermaling together and just had like perfect communication, I would feel so much more comfortable turning close to people, just because I know that they're aware. And there's some really good tips that I've heard to figure out if people are aware. But like at this point, if I could just, you know, have like a little green light that says, okay, this person I can turn really tightly into thermal with, that would be huge, because I would never have flown this close in a thermal to somebody. Wingtips touching, getting lift in this thermal, and we can just see it. Look at that climb. I mean, I just climbed a huge amount. And just a little note on the soft side of things. My little Vario, you can see the blue fly Vario dangling around. It sounded so crazy. It was like kind of like a little mini Doppler shift as it spun. Sounded super wild. I gotta get some like rubber bands or something to lock that down. First time flying with a full visor, my field of view was greatly improved. One huge thing I noticed in Mexico is I wasn't loving my field of view with my goggles, so I was using glasses. And I was like, my face was getting cold. I'm like, all right, it's time to just lock down, get a visor. And this is kind of like a little soapbox moment, but I'd been using a used helmet that was probably at least 10 years old the entire time I've been flying that older helmet. Reading through the manual, if you do not use the helmet at all, the lifespan of the helmet, this model of helmet, is 7 years. And if you're using it with like, you know, regular use, the manufacturer rated lifetime is 5 years. Throw that out as a PSA. I think in flying, it's generally good to follow manufacturer recommendations for things. I personally know a ton of people using used helmets or helmets that are clearly old. Another note on the helmet. We saw me opening the visor. It was kind of weird having the visor down, I gotta say. I was getting a little bit more airsick, I think, as a result. I think part of it is maybe some off-gassing from like the fresh material in the helmet. Perhaps, I don't even know, but it wasn't like nice smooth easy air. You know, it's kind of bouncing around the whole time, and I definitely felt a little bit airsick from that. I'm getting pretty exhausted. I got an hour in, which was exceeding expectations. A little background on the logistics of the day. I was on my way to Crestline. I'd already signed up for the van. Sorry, Sandy, for signing up and bailing last minute. And then I got a call, and Joe was like, hey, there's a truck going up Kagel. Do you want a spot? I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. That's going to save me an hour of my drive. I'm like 20 minutes away from Kagel right now. I was driving east and got here. So I was, you know, looking at the wind grams. I've been trying to look at like the soaring website, trying to figure this out. And I didn't think today was going to be great. So when he said it was going to be good, I was like surprised. And so I was like, at this point in the flight, I was like, dang, I got an hour. Like, that's awesome. I'm pretty tired. I'm starting to be like, you know, getting a little sore in the hips and the knees. Shoulders really sore, my right shoulder, kind of a bad shoulder on the right side. Let's just power through, lock in, and let's do it. And so I'm glad I made that decision. My hips actually really sore today. This is the day after I'm recording this, but I think it was worth it. Hopefully the hip's not hurting in a couple days, but we'll see. So here I'm getting really low. I'm way below the ridge, and Joe has just dropped down. And Joe just comes in here, and this is what I was talking about earlier, just dropping down, dude. It looks so cool when he's up on the base tube like that. And he's just, this is not at all like I felt slighted, but it was just a slap in the face of like, damn, like there is levels to this hang gliding stuff. And I am not on a high one, because this guy is just able to drop down to where I feel like I'm close to just having to bail. And he's like, dude, check this out. I'm gonna go up. You better hop in this thermal with me, because we're going for a ride. Hop on, let's go. I'm using the ground probably too much as an indicator of where the lift is. And the reality is, especially on a day like today where it's blowing, 15 miles an hour, and the wind today is like basically blowing up the ridge. The thermal is not straight above the ground. It's got a slope to it. It's, at a diagonal or whatever. It's getting blown by the wind as it moves up into the air. And so I think that what I did, at least on today, and maybe in other flights potentially, is I'm using the ground too much as a reference. And this kept on happening to me, and it was really good to get this feedback in the flight of, hey, you keep on dropping out of the thermals upwind. So basically what that means is I'm turning too fast on the downwind side, and I should be turning faster on the upwind side probably, or at least just equalizing it so there's not an imbalance, and I need to drift back with the thermal, essentially, is what needs to happen. And so this one I'm on my own finally, and maybe it's part of not having someone talking as much helped me lock in a little bit more, freed up some mental bandwidth for whatever's going on in my brain processing how to catch a thermal. I don't know. I think part of it is just, hearing those words, thinking about things, and then finally getting a chance to act on it, more practice. But either way, this one I really start to drift back behind the ridge, which is what I was trying to do. I'm trying to stay with that thermal as it shifts and moves back. And just looking at the graph, this was my best climb of the day, and I think my best climb ever. And so that was really, really great for me to see of this stuff's really working out. Drifting back with the thermal, especially on a windy day, is 100% what's going on. There's a lot of thermals out. You can't look at the ground. You gotta feel the air and get a good mental picture of what the thermal is doing in the air. Finding the trigger point is great. That's a good place to start. But once you get high off the ground like this, I'm 1,000 feet off the ground, the trigger point is not indicative of where the thermal is anymore. If it's no wind, maybe it's right above it. Which doesn't happen, there's always a little bit of wind. But on a day like today where it's relatively windy, it's gonna be way off. And figuring out where that is, and maybe the wind speed is changing as you move up, you gotta do some pretty good just kind of feeling it in the gut, honestly, of staying in that thermal core. And I think one thing I really liked about my turns on this one is I was pushing out a lot more, and that's another huge thing that I think I need to work on, is flying much closer to trim or stall speed. I noticed that I was having this habit of pulling in, entering thermals, or pulling in to gain control, and I'm just, it's kind of like a mini pilot-induced oscillation. Not really, but I'm overcompensating, trying to get too much control when I should be just focusing on flying really slow and getting a nice steep slow turn, which feels kind of weird. But in this one, I just really felt that lock in of push out, kind of banked over pretty hard, and just getting a ton of really fast spirals, and it totally made me feel a little bit airsick, which I didn't love. I think that's a getting used to it thing, and it was a kind of bumpy day thing. Yeah, it's probably time to call it. So start cruising down, don't find a ton of lift, don't get a ton of lift, cruising down. And here's Joe just looking like freaking Superman. Not actually position-wise, but, vibes of Superman just coming in. Looks so cool. It's straight out of a movie. Just amazing flying. And so this was really cool flying next to him. He's like, hey, can I fly close? I'm like, heck yeah, dude, let's do it. It's going to look great on the camera. I think it did. It's 360, so it's kind of grainy. Sorry about it. Flying with Matt, he's working on getting a better camera setup on the base too. This would have been a really cool time to have that set up. Could have gotten some amazing shots here. So really excited for some possibilities with some bigger lift days, maybe a ridge soaring day in the future with Matt, getting some really cool shots. And so coming in for landing here, this was just really fun. Kind of the cherry on top of an amazing flight. Just getting these great views of the valley, seeing another hang glider. Really like the underside of this glider.
Sweet.
I'm going to land in the pattern with you just to give you some annoyance. But I will stay clear of you. So do your approach. I just want people in your way a little bit, okay?
So I actually got a little bit of a thermal here, and I was like, damn, maybe I should try to fly this thing. And I'm like, actually, nah, dude, I'm freaking tired. My legs are freaking shot, exhausted. Let's call it. So I do some turns and just try to start getting down. Pulling in here, this was really interesting talking to Joe afterwards about, getting even faster on the pull in would probably be good. But I'm happy with that. And I came in pretty high. I think maybe because I just recently did 2 Parma landings, but came in kind of high. Totally ended up fine. But I should have angled more to the left, just based on the height that I had. We see how close I am to that picnic table and that poor little cute, adorable dog. But if I, for some reason, I got even more lift or like something crazy had happened, I definitely was cutting it a little bit close. So I should have angled left and not gone for the straight upwind approach, which was another great point that I got on before today's flight of the upwind landing approach isn't always the best approach. You got to kind of play to the terrain, not just the wind. Amazing flight. Really appreciate the help on the radio. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.